Chapter 253. Why can't I be here? His Highness Hell King's strength and identity were thought of as unattainable. His attitude to the outside world was always indifferent, cold, and unyielding. Even when everyone was rushing like ducks towards this dangerous sealed dragon domain, his attitude was like a skillful butcher with a cleaver. He didn't attach the slightest importance to any of the treasures. But at this very moment anyone who was observant could see how agitated Hell King was, how much anger and worry was contained in his voice. Qing Long, who was behind Nangong Yu, held back the impulse to support his forehead. Why does his master become a completely different person every time he saw Miss Naylan? Hashi, of course, saw Nangong Yu. She had noticed earlier than Jiyu Liufeng and Feng Lianying that there were people approaching, but before she had the time to think any further, Feng Lianying seemed to have been seriously injured and fell, uttering a delicate yet miserable shriek. At first Hashi felt that this was strange. The whole time Jiyu Liufeng hadn't been trying his hardest, while Feng Lianying had become quite powerful after taking a red phosphorus pill. So how could she have somehow been hit? It wasn't until she saw the purple-robed man holding Feng Lianying in his arms with a face full of rage, and Nangong Yu following behind that she understood. Her heart filled with an icy sneer. So it was a staged trick. No wonder she would rather bear Jiyu Liufeng's blow. It was all for the sake of staging this scene. Didn't she see how angry and how distressed her brother Yu was now? Thinking up to here, a corner of Hush's mouth curled into a cold smile. Your Highness Hell King and Ice Lotus Fairy could come here, so why can't I come? Or do you think this secret territory was opened by your Hell King manner? Nangong Yu was dumbfounded. How long had it been since he'd heard a Levener using such a cold tone when speaking to him? However, when Nangong Yu's gaze fell to the wound that hadn't yet healed on her left shoulder and her small pale face, his heart tightened with intense anger and distress. How can this girl be so reckless? What kind of place is this sealed dragon domain? Even gold core stage martial artists were cautious when they would come, and yet she, such a delicate woman, actually dared to enter the inner layer of the secret territory. If something had happened, if Nangong Yu didn't dare to think any further, the fear and worry in his heart changing into an overflowing fury. It caused him to walk over in large strides to the little girl who watched him with a stubborn attitude. However, he barely took a step when the corner of his robes were pulled by someone, while in his ears came Feng Lianying's weak voice, "Brother Yu, I'm cold, so painful." Upon saying that, she abruptly began to vomit blood. Her beautiful face had become a deathly pale. It looked like she could die at any moment. Chapter 254. Troubling young master Hashi wasn't angry with Feng Lianying's shamelessness, nor was she angry with Nangong Yu's heartlessness. Rather, she was angry towards herself for actually being tripped over by a stone twice. She clearly knew that love and promises couldn't be trusted, yet why did she still care about it like a dimwit? And she clearly knew that she shouldn't be tempted, that she couldn't believe them. Yet why did she still allow other people to occupy her heart little by little? Hashi, Hashi, in the end, what were you expecting? Were you expecting that Nangong Yu would abandon his childhood sweetheart and come to you? Or that you would be enough to turn him against his childhood sweetheart? Haha, dream on. But since she had now woken up to reality, if she were to withdraw now it wouldn't be too late, would it? Hashi's hands tightly clenched into fists, not at all sensing her fingernails embedding themselves into her palms. Suddenly, a man's deep and magnetic voice entered her ears. "TSK, TSK, this could be disastrous." His Highness Hell King and his bodyguard Qing Long, as well as Liu Li sect's senior disciple Nai Jinchen, all of these few people possess at least the high-level strength of a gold core stage martial artist. His Highness Hell King is the strongest, so strong that no one can find out the depth of his strength. Now it seems that our situation is bad, really bad. Hashi came back to her senses and glanced at the man wearing bright red beside her. When she saw him say the words "really bad," she noticed that his expression was relaxed and without a trace of worry. But when he withstood Nangong Yu's sword attack, he had obviously sustained a heavy surge of spiritual energy. Now the bright red blood on his thin lips had faded into a pale color. Hashi suddenly reached her hand out and gripped his wrist, then started pouring her spiritual power into his meridians. Jiyu Liufeng was startled. By reflex he wanted to struggle and free his hand, But when he realized the way in which she was examining his condition, he couldn't help but show an interested expression. "You're the little genius doctor that Yangan mentioned?" But before Hushi could answer, Ju Yangan had already replied. "Young master, it is him, genius doctor Shi Yu. His medical skill has reached perfection. Even Ouyang's heir was able to have his broken meridians healed after more than a year of disability. Believe me." Ju Yangan hadn't yet finished speaking when Jiyu Liufeng took back his hand, preventing Hushi from continuing to examine him. Hushi didn't force him, instead indifferently saying, "If you want to completely dissolve the energy from the sword concealed within your body, I need to give an acupuncture treatment to your 3 acupuncture points: lung meridian, shoulder meridian, and back meridian." Jiyu Liufeng stared blankly, then fixedly looked at her for a moment before suddenly laughing. "Then I'll have to trouble young master Shi." After saying this, he didn't mind in the slightest and took off his clothes, exposing the packed muscles and smooth veins on his naked upper body. Hushi stood behind him and nimbly started to insert the silver needles in her hand into his acupuncture points. Then her figure flashed and she came in front of Jiyu Liufeng, inserting the last silver needle into his lung meridian acupuncture point to slowly help the excess energy drain out. Hence Hushi's movements became very slow, while the thin and transparent silver needles held in her fingers lightly twirled. This was accompanied with the pure essence of spiritual power permeating into the air little by little. At this moment, Jiyu Liufeng sat cross-legged on the grass with Hushi slightly bending her body over him to rotate the silver needles with a focused and dignified expression. The natural light in the secret territory fell on the youth's fair face and shined upon his straight exquisite nose, pink and tender cherry lips, as well as long eyelashes that were as thick as a fan. The youth's head leaned forward slightly, his long shapely eyebrows lightly creasing. From Jiyu Liufeng's point of view he could see the youth's pointed chin, fair and slender neck, and the fine radian slowly extending to his delicate collarbone, which then slanted to his slightly open robe. Chapter 255. Pull out your tongue. The youth's slender and fair hand was just like piece of carved jade as it gently hovered over his bare skin, while every so often the youth's cool touch would bring with it a throbbing feeling that made him shudder. Jiyu Liufeng felt a sudden skip in his chest, and bowing his head, the steady energy within his body suddenly surged and brought a bright red color to lips once again. His expression was calm, but in his mind a line continuously echoed, "This little genius doctor called Shi Yu was rather too good-looking." As soon as Nangong Yu crouched to examine Feng Lianying's condition, he immediately knew that she only had minor injuries. It simply wasn't as serious as the expression on her face suggested. With his face turning gloomy, he then got up and went to find Hushi. Yet just as he did, his robe was once again pulled on by Feng Lianying. "Brother Yu, just then I had to take a red phosphorus pill to be able to compete against Jiyu Liufeng. Later on, I won't be able to advance, right? Brother Yu, will you dislike me then?" Even with this remark, Nangong Yu still didn't respond. However, Nai Jingchen's, the purple-robed man's, complexion changed, and with distress and anger flashing across his face, he said, "Little sister Lianying, didn't master say that unless it was a last resort, you shouldn't take a red phosphorus pill? Your innate skill is rare. Taking a red phosphorus pill will encumber you for several years." Feng Lianying showed a sad and grievous expression, while her beautiful eyes gazed at Nangong Yu as she choked on sobs. "I was all alone, while the other side had 3 people. If I didn't use a red phosphorus pill, I don't know if I could have waited until the arrival of you all and Brother Yu. If I didn't have the assistance of a red phosphorus pill to allow me to hold on until this moment, I don't know how they would have humiliated me. They're going too far." Nai Jinchen roared with a gravelly voice. "Since they dared to hurt you to such a point, I'll make those 3 wretches pay you back 1,000 times over. Little sister Lianying, just wait, I'll go take revenge for you now." However, Nai Jinchen hadn't yet finished speaking, when Nangong Yu's face darkened and he coldly said, "Shut your mouth." Nai Jinchen was startled and didn't react for a while. His face expressed a somewhat confused look. Nangong Yu's cold gaze swept over him, and he unhurriedly stressed his words, "If you say wretches again, I'll pull your tongue out." The weather in the secret territory was warm, but Nai Jinchen felt so cold he was shivering. Nangong Yu's gaze at this moment was too frightening. It was as if Nai Jinchen continued speaking, the other party would immediately tear him to shreds. However, Feng Lianying's pretty face twisted, intense jealousy and hatred glinting in her eyes. From his clothes, Nan Gongyu withdrew a bottle of medicinal pills and threw it to Nai Jinchen. Give this pill to Lianying and use your spiritual power to unblock her meridians. After an hour she will be healed. Joy flashed within Nai Jinchen's eyes. If he had to use his spiritual power to unblock her meridians, then that meant that he and little sister Lianying would have to be in close contact. Nai Jinchen was the senior disciple of the head of the Liu Li sect. At such a young age he had already reached the peak of gold core stage, so it could be said that he had boundless prospects. Throughout Mi Luo continent there were many women who admired him, completely willing to be his concubine. But in Nai Jinchen's heart, he had always been attracted to his junior, Feng Lianying, no other woman. With regard to Feng Lianying's words, he took them as absolute truth and would never disobey her. Now that Nan Gongyu had given him an opportunity to get close to his goddess, how could he not be happy? Nai Jinchen poured a medicinal pill out of the bottle for Feng Lianying to swallow, but was fiercely pushed away. Watching as Nan Gongyu got up without hesitation and abandoned her, her heart was filled with extreme hatred. Chapter 256. What are you doing? Before having known Shi Yu, that scoundrel, brother Yu had never treated her like this. He had never regarded her as nothing. If that bastard could disappear sooner, then that would be great. With this thought, Feng Lianying creased her brows and uttered a pained moan. Grabbing onto Nai Jinchen's sleeve, she said with a grief-filled voice, "Senior brother, all my life up until now, I've never suffered such a humiliation. Especially from that brat called Shi Yu. He's a man and yet he actually wanted to seduce brother Yu. He even wanted me to kneel and apologize to him. When I didn't agree, they tried to kill me. Who gave them dog guts?" When Nai Jinchen heard this, he felt fury boiling in his heart, a murderous intent that burned him up. However, before he could finish speaking, he felt a severe fluctuation of spiritual power mixing with a tremendous amount of fury rage through the secret territory. In their ears came Nan Gongyu's demon-like voice, "What are you doing?" Although Nan Gongyu had seemingly been occupied by Feng Lianying's dying drama, in his heart, he had only been thinking of Hushi. After he had confirmed that Feng Lianying was merely exaggerating a minor injury just to get his sympathy, he immediately became fed up. But, just as he turned around, he saw a scene that made him burn with jealousy. The scene was of the naked upper body of a young man wearing a mask, which revealed a smooth torso, while a beautiful youngster bowed his head and stared attentively at the man's body. The distance between the two was close, so close that their breaths were mingling. It was almost as if in the next moment they would intimately embrace each other. Nan Gongyu felt a fiery flame soar in his heart, burning it. This flame seemed to carry with it thistles and thorns, mutilating his heart. On one hand he was angry, while on the other hand he felt the heartache and hatred of being betrayed and abandoned, making him want to tear up everything in sight. The moment Nan Gongyu had shouted, it just so happened that Hushi had been cleaning the energy within Jiyu Liufeng's body, slowly pulling out the silver needle that was inserted in his lung meridian acupuncture point. But abruptly she felt an immense amount of spiritual pressure in the atmosphere capable of crushing people. After all, her cultivation base was only at meridian stage. This, coupled with the injury she had received before, using up her spiritual power, and now a formidable spiritual pressure attack, all caused her complexion to pale in an instant. The next moment a blazing shadow enveloped her, this tall figure blocking her without hesitation. She heard Jiyu Liufeng's concerned voice reach her ears, "My clothes are made from special ice silk, it can withstand most spiritual pressure and divine sense attacks. If you drape it over your shoulders you'll feel much better." Hushi was startled as the crimson robes were wrapped around her. A slight trace of warmth and fragrance wafted from the clothes, making the uncomfortable feeling of a moment ago disappear in a flash. While Jiyu Liufeng was now only wearing white inner clothing, his aura seemed leisurely and graceful as he nonetheless firmly protected her behind him. Jiyu Liufeng faced Nan Gongyu, the sound of laughter clear in his voice, "Your Highness Hell King, I've always respected you as a hero of Jinling Kingdom, but now you're unable to distinguish the truth from lies and have listened a woman's slander. I'm afraid that isn't very wise, right? How could Nangongyu pay attention to what he had said, when his heart and eyes were only filled with the sight of this man and Hashi standing very close together? Furthermore, this man had even dared to drape his clothes over Hashi's body. His complexion was so glacial it seemed like water could be squeezed out of it, while his voice was like a demon's from hell. Immediately get away from her, otherwise, don't blame me for being ruthless. Chapter 257, Oscar winner Jiyu Liufeng was startled. He felt that Hell King's attitude was very strange. But before he could speak, Hashi pulled on his sleeve and stood in front of him. She then coldly said, "Move aside, this has nothing to do with you. The person they want to deal with is me, so you should take shopkeeper Ju with you and leave now." Jiyu Liufeng ignored her and heedlessly walked up to stand by her side. "You don't know this, but from the moment Feng Lianying and I fought, our fates became intertwined. That shameful woman is so petty, do you really think that she'll let us off?" Hush's brows wrinkled, and glancing at the faint spiritual power fluctuations of Ju Yangan next to them, her voice became gloomy. "Sorry, it's because of me that the two of you have become involved." As Jiyu Liufeng tilted his head to look at the side of Hush's beautiful, snow-white face, he could feel his heart softening. It was as if there was a warmth slowly building in his chest. But before he could say something again, his expression suddenly changed. His hand that had initially moved to console Hashi was abruptly pulled back, and he staggered backwards several steps. A sharp, sword-like energy fiercely struck his body and he fell to the ground. This made grass bits fly everywhere, some fluttering to land on Hush's hair and clothes. Jiyu Liufeng lifted his gaze, only to meet with Nangongyu's dark and fearful glare. It was in these eyes that he saw a murderous rage, one that seemed as if Nangongyu wanted to dismember him, crushing his bones and scattering their dust. The next moment Nangongyu changed his line of sight, looking from him to the point next to him. Glaring at the pale complexion of Hashi, he slowly extended his hand. "Elevena, come here." Hashi coldly looked at him, the look on her face like condensed frost. "Go over there, what for?" "To allow you, your highness Hell King, to kill me and take revenge for your beloved little sister Lianying." The look on Nangongyu's face was beyond ugly, and he suddenly walked forwards a step before darkly saying, "Elevena, in your heart." His words hadn't yet finished, when Feng Lianying, who had previously been lying on the grounds acting like she was on her last breath, stood up. With Nai Jinshan's support, she went to Nangongyu's side and grabbed his sleeve. "Brother Yu, don't be like this. Young master, she didn't purposely injure me, you mustn't blame him." Hashi looked at the intimacy of the two people, and the coldness in her eyes became colder, little by little, like a 1,000-years-old glacier. Such a pure and kind-hearted white lotus. Look at that emotion in her eyes, that expression, and that tone. If this act had been seen in her past life, then Feng Lianying would definitely have been suitable to win an Oscar. In front of people she appeared pure, cold, and noble, but behind their backs she was malicious and fierce. And now, she had managed to change once more by becoming delicate and pitiful. A man would unconditionally believe her and want to cherish her, wishing to hold her in their arms. Nangongyu was also a man. With such a beauty throwing herself into his arms, how could his heart not be moved? As she sneered at her own thoughts, Jiyu Liufeng suddenly leaned towards her and whispered in her ear, "Little Yua, do you know if there's a problem with that fairy's eyes? Obviously it was me who injured her, yet why is she implying that it was you who injured her? You're only foundation establishment stage, while she's gold core stage. By saying that it was you who injured her, isn't she afraid of losing face? Little Yua, where did that stupid nickname come from?" Hashi aimed a glare at him, then looked back at Feng Lianying and sneered, "You say that as if she wasn't injured by me, and that she hadn't hurt anyone before me. So what if she was a gold core stage martial artist? She dared to provoke my people. Even if she herself wasn't a match with Feng Lianying, the least she could do was make her pay a price of being skinned alive." At this moment, Feng Lianying was wearing a white dress stained with specks of crimson blood, while her complexion was deathly pale. As the wind blew, it caused her white dress to flutter, making her appear like a willow, all delicate and charming. Chapter 258. Don't touch her with your dirty hands. Upon hearing Hush's remark, Rage flashed in her eyes first, before glistening teardrops welled in them. Pulling on Nangongyu's sleeve, it seemed as if she had suffered an enormous grievance as she bit her lip and said, "Young Master Shi and young Master Gu's relationship is really good. I'd heard that Jiyu Liufeng's conduct was usually arrogant and unsociable, yet today you unexpectedly agreed with young Master Shi to regard me an enemy. The friendship between the two of you is really enviable. However, since I'm considering giving young Master Shi face, I won't bother dealing with Jiyu Liufeng. You'd better go. Quickly leave before brother Yu gets angry. Rest assured, I will try my best to appease brother Yu." Though she'd said it in a lovely and pitifully manner, provocativeness and bragging was visible in Feng Lianying's eyes. As she looked at Hushi, a coldness appeared in her eyes that quickly disappeared, and when she turned to look back at Nangongyu, she acted gentle and kind-hearted. Nai Jinchen was still supporting her on the side, and his face had long become flushed due to anger. Having heard everything she was saying, he could feel his rage growing. "Nangong, don't listen to little sister Lian Ying. She was too kind-hearted, and that made some people who are unable to tell good from bad dare to have such ideas against her. Such vicious people like these, they shouldn't be spared. Let them know how people end up when they commit an offense towards people they shouldn't offend." Jiyu Liufeng clicked his tongue in praise, and putting a hand on Hushi's shoulder, he sighed, "I've seen shameless people, but I've never before seen one so shameless. I never would have thought that the famous Hell King would actually fancy such a disgusting woman. Really, seeing it for yourself is 100 times better than hearing it from someone else. Little Yua, I think it's better that we don't get involved with this bunch of insane people. They're so shameless that it's unbearable to watch. Since we aren't their match in strength, we might as well take this opportunity to run." Tilda. Having said that, Jiyu Liufeng leaned close to Hushi's ear to seemingly tease her, and whispered, "In a moment I'll count to 3. You take Yangan behind me and hide, we only have one chance to escape." Hushi nodded, but when she raised her head she met with Nangongyu's burning gaze, causing her chest to feel like it was being crushed by a heavy stone. Suddenly, Nangongyu walked towards her with large steps. And because Feng Lianying was still latching onto his sleeve, she ended up stumbling due to his abrupt movement. She watched Nangongyu's back in disbelief as he left with quick strides, and she immediately shouted loudly, "Brother Yu." However, Nangongyu's pace didn't pause in the slightest, it even seemed as though he didn't hear her. Seeing Nangongyu walk towards them, Jiyu Liufeng's face became grave. So leaning closer to Hushi's ear once more, he went to whisper to her. All of a sudden, lightning appeared out of the blue to fiercely strike Jiyu Liufeng's arm. Staggering a step backwards, he uttered a muffled groan. The arm that had been struck by lightning now a bloody sight to behold. Nangongyu glared at him with a ruthless and bloodthirsty gaze, his voice dark and cold as he spat out from between his teeth and lips, "I said, don't touch her with your dirty hand." Jiyu Liufeng was startled, but before he could react Hushi had already grabbed his injured arm, quickly spilling a silvery white medicinal powder onto the wound. In the blink of an eye, that bloody wound rapidly stopped bleeding and healed. Following that, in such a short moment, it had already become a scab. Hushi heaved a sigh of relief, and asked him in a somewhat concerned voice, "Are you okay?" Just as those words left her mouth, she felt something tightly wrap around her waist. But before she could realize what was happening, her body soared into the air to land in a warm embrace. When she raised her head, her eyes met with Nangongyu's bloodshot eyes. Chapter 259, How Could I Kill You? The eyes glaring at her were frighteningly bloodthirsty, and paired with such a murderous aura being exuded from his body, it could make anyone tremble from fear. It was as though in the next moment that she would be torn into shreds and devoured. Hushi's heart sank little by little, while the corners of her mouth curled into a forlorn yet mocking smile. This man, does he hate her now? Does he hate her because she injured his beloved woman? Those previous sentimental feelings, those previous promises, in front of his beloved Ice Lotus Fairy, does he regard them as? Nangongyu raised her chin, then slowly said, "Elevena, I just told you to come to me, didn't you hear me?" His voice was exceptionally gentle, but when it reached her ears, it caused her to shudder. She wanted to step away from him, but her entire body was enveloped by a tremendous amount of spiritual power pressure, leaving her unable to move even a single step. This was her first time directly experiencing Nangong Yu's formidable strength, helping her to understand how it made despair grow in a person's heart. Feng Lianying suddenly raised her voice and shouted from where she was standing not too far away from them, "Brother Yu, I know you're angry on my behalf, but young master, she is your friend after all. Please, consider my reputation and don't make things too difficult for them, okay? Young master, she didn't intentionally injure me, I believe he certainly knows his mistake." After saying this, she then turned to shout at Hashi, "Young master, she, quickly admit your mistake to Brother Yu. Otherwise, when Brother Yu's anger explodes, even I won't be able to stop him. Do you want to just helplessly watch on as your young master Jiyu dies in Brother Yu's hands?" Hashi sneered upon hearing that, and a lustrous purple shade gleamed within her jet-black phoenix eyes. She then firmly stared at Nangong Yu as she said, "Is this your purpose for calling me over? It was to kill me to take revenge on behalf of your close female friend? Nangong Yu, am I that foolish in your eyes, so foolish that I'll obediently send myself to you and let you kill me?" Nangong Yu's entire body shook, and his arm that was wrapped around her waist tightened as he said in a trembling voice, "Elevena, what nonsense you are talking about? How could I kill you?" Just hearing her say that and thinking that this girl might die in the secret territory, he was so scared his blood turned cold. Elevena would actually go so far as to say he would kill her. "Young master, I said earlier that I won't let Brother Yu kill you, so why do you have to misunderstand me?" came Feng Lianying's tear-filled voice. "Wasn't it enough that you had Jiyu Liufeng try to kill me? Yet now you also want to slander me in front of Brother Yu. You, why do you hate me so much? Little sister Lianying, why you have to say so much to such a person?" Almost without thinking, Hashi summoned an ice sword to her hand, and charged straight towards Nangong Yu and Jiyu Liufeng. No matter what, she couldn't involve Jiyu Liufeng and allow him to die for her in this secret territory. She, Hashi, disliked most the feeling of owing someone else, let alone the price of a life. The ice sword charged straight towards Nangong Yu, drawing dangerously close to his heart and chilling him to the bone. Nangong Yu turned around to avoid the attack. With his eyes staring fixedly at her, his icy cold, gloomy voice was filled with hoarse disbelief and heartache as he asked, "You actually want to raise your hand and fight me, for another man?" Hashi was engulfed by the swirling storm and pain within his eyes, causing her heart to become stifled as she saw this. "Elevena, tell me, do you really want to attack me for another man?" Hashi's face paled, and the tense grip of her hand around the sword loosened. However, seeing an insidious smile on Feng Lianying nearby, as well as Jiyu Liufeng's slightly swollen and purple complexion, her expression quickly became cold. "I said before, didn't I? Since Feng Lianying was injured by me, if you want revenge for her, then this has nothing to do with Jiyu Liufeng." Chapter 261. Why didn't you dodge? Nangong Yu looked at her in a daze, as if he had lost his soul. Suddenly, his throat lightly vibrated as he started to quietly laugh. Yet no matter how you listened to this laughter, it seemed to be oppressive, like the warning to an approaching hurricane. "Elevena, is that what you think? You think the reason I wanted to approach you was to kill you in order to avenge her? In your heart, you've never believed in me, have you? Everything that I've done for you, was it all just meaningless to you? Elevena, is your heart made of stone?" Hush's face turned pale, as it felt like a hand had suddenly grabbed her heart and squeezed it. Her reason told her to never again believe Nangong Yu, to never again open her heart. However, the Nangong Yu before her eyes currently had an expression filled with depression and despair, like he was being abandoned by the world. Yet just at this moment, her ears abruptly heard Nangong Yu's dark and hoarse voice, "Or, do you really care about this man? Care about him so much that you wouldn't hesitate to be hostile towards me? If that's so, then he must die." After he spoke, a dark thunderstorm condensed in his left hand, before he then fiercely threw it towards Jiyu Liufeng's dantian. Hush's expression abruptly changed while she seemed to hear a loud bang in her mind. With her body instinctively moving as fast as a shadow, she savagely thrust the ice sword in her hand in front of her. A squelch could be heard as the edge of the sword was thrust into a body. Apparently it was only a quiet sound, but to Hashi it was like a clap of thunder echoing in her ears. Hashi was so frightened she immediately released the sword in her hand, and she stared straight at the bright red stain spreading across her vision. Her always calm and collected face revealed a horrified expression for the first time. More than half of the sword made from ice was now piercing the left side of Nangongyu's chest. When Hashi released her hand, the sword was lacking the support of her spiritual power and slowly turned into liquid, mixing with the blood as it dripped down. Hashi felt her throat dry up. The voice that forced itself out of her mouth was hoarse and strained as she asked, why didn't you dodge? Nangongyu slowly released his grip on Jiyu Liufeng's throat as his eyes unwaveringly looked at Hashi. The weather in the secret territory was as warm as spring, but at this moment, the surrounding vegetation began to rapidly wither and the air filled with a terribly cold atmosphere. The eyes of everyone present were filled with fear and shock. Those with low cultivation bases were even trembling in fear. Hashi suddenly took a step forward, shaking as she asked, "How's your wound?" Looking at the position of the wound, it shouldn't be near the heart, but there was an extreme amount of blood indicating that the injury was near an artery. Even for a martial artist, this wasn't a minor injury. Nangongyu, why didn't he dodge? However, Hashi had just stepped forward, when a sudden force fiercely knocked her aside. She staggered twice and almost fell. Her ears then heard Feng Lianying's distressed cries, "Brother Yu, are you okay? So much blood keeps flowing. How could this happen?" As she said that, she glared tearfully at Hashi, then bitterly shouted, "Young Master Shi, how could you harm him? Brother Yu has always been kind to you. You actually injured him for a stranger. Even if you have a shameful relationship with Jiyu Liufeng, doing this was too much." After saying this, she then turned and looked at Nangongyu's wound. As she watched the bright red blood pouring from the wound, translucent tears slowly trickled down her cheeks. "Brother Yu, don't worry, I have the best medicine for your wound in my possession. It will certainly heal you. Such a cruel, wicked, and ungrateful person, we definitely won't be having any encounters with him in the future." Chapter 262, It has nothing to do with you having heard that. Hush's eyes darkened and she turned to walk towards Jiyu Liufeng's direction. "Where do you think you're going?" A roar suddenly echoed around them, seeming as if it would rip apart heaven and earth, while a formidable amount of spiritual power pressure erupted from Nangongyu's body. Feng Lianying was caught off guard as she stood beside him, and she went flying into the air like a kite with its string snapped, crying miserably in shock the whole time. Nai Jinchen immediately caught her in his embrace, asking in a concerned tone, "Little sister Lianying, are you all right?" Feng Lianying, however, pushed him away and rushed back towards Nangongyu. Brother Yu, I'm Lianying. Let me see your wound." However, before she could get near Nangongyu, she was once again sent flying into Nai Jinchen's embrace. Feng Lianying was shocked to discover that Nangongyu was now in the center of an invisible spiritual barrier that he had formed, and Hashi was inside the spiritual barrier with him. Nobody could get close to the pair, but Hashi couldn't escape either. At this very moment, apart from Hashi, no one else could enter Nangongyu's eyes. Why does Brother Yu only have eyes for that bastard? What's so good about that brat? He injured Brother Yu, but instead of Brother Yu killing him, it seems that he's using every possible means to keep that bastard by his side. Feng Lianying bit on her lower lip hard, so hard that she didn't even realize the blood slowly starting to trickle down her chin. And so now that Hashi was trapped inside the spiritual barrier, before she had time to react, Nangongyu's figure abruptly moved and appeared before her in the blink of an eye. And slowly, he started approaching her step by step. His stature was tall and slender, with a handsome face that could make every woman in the world captivated with him. But at this moment, his face was positively glacial, like it had gathered thousands of years' worth of ice. This matched his body, which exuded a terribly dark aura. As he slowly approached Hashi, the blood from his chest exuded a strong metallic smell. This, in contrast to his pale and handsome complexion, made him seem like a fallen demon king. "Elevena, where do you think you're going? Are you going to that man? Is he that important to you?" Hush's complexion paled, The immense amount of spiritual power pressure being emitted from Nangongyu's body was making it extremely difficult for her to breathe. However, when she met with Nangongyu's rage-filled eyes, her stubbornness stirred, and she raised her small chin into the air as she coldly said, "In regards to whoever I want to go to, it has nothing to do with you. It has nothing to do with me." Nangongyu took a step forward, and in the blink of an eye he arrived in front of Hushi, tightly gripping her shoulders as he asked, "Then who does it have anything to do with, Jiu Liufeng?" Hushi bit her lip, her expression icy and unbending as she hoarsely said, "If yes, then so what? You can go back to your beloved Ice Lotus Fairy, so please don't interfere with my life from now on." A scarlet blaze suddenly ignited within Nangongyu's eyes, and the atmosphere around him was abruptly filled with a crackling noise that echoed all around them. At the same time, terrible dark clouds covered the sky of the secret territory, layer by layer. In an instant it seemed like it was about to rain, and that a major catastrophe was about to occur. Hush's face was filled with shock, and without having a chance to speak, she suddenly felt extremely dizzy. It was like her body was being drawn into a powerful vortex. The enormous amount of spiritual power within the vortex constantly fluctuated as it pulled at Hush's body, making her feel like she would be torn apart at any moment. However, very quickly, she felt herself being held in a warm embrace. That embrace emitted a formidable amount of spiritual power pressure that enveloped her and blocked all the pain that she was experiencing. She then vaguely seemed to hear a man's gloomy voice echo in her ears, and it was tinged with a slight amount of exasperation and deep love. "Elevena, you're mine. You'll forever be at my side." Chapter 263. Infidelity. Hushi drowsily opened her eyes as she felt the breeze caress her cheeks and tease her hair. As she went to move her hands and feet, she instead felt her body being restrained by something. When it sensed that she wanted to struggle, whatever was confining her seemed to tighten. Looking up, Hushi saw Nangongyu's pale and handsome, yet cold complexion enter her sight. She was so shocked that she started struggling harder to free herself. However, Nangongyu's hands were restraining her and he tightened his arms around her body. "Nangongyu, let me go. Dream on." Nangongyu replied coldly, "I said it before, but in this lifetime only you can be my princess, and only you can be my woman. If you dare to get close to other men, then I'll kill all the men around you." Hushi was annoyed and grit her teeth as she retorted, "Who's your woman? Wasn't your woman your beloved little sister Lian Ying? Since you like to imprison people, you can just go back and lock her up to prevent her from randomly disturbing people." Nangongyu lowered his eyes as he looked at Hushi. His expression was like condensed frost as he said in a somewhat helpless tone of voice, "When have I ever said that Feng Lian Ying is my woman? In this lifetime, I've never even touched a woman's hand. The only woman who I've ever been intimate with and touched is you, Elevena. Who'd believe you?" Hushi suddenly started moving her spiritual power about, intending to struggle free from Nangongyu's embrace. But when she fell to the ground, she was surprised. She was actually able to free herself so easily from Nangongyu. As Hushi was confused, she started examining her surroundings and became surprised when she discovered that she was now in what appeared to be a valley. Surrounded by tall and sturdy sheer cliffs, the peaks couldn't even be seen due to being blocked by the clouds. "Where is this? How could we come to this place? Where are the other people?" Hushi glared at Nangongyu as she asked him. Nangongyu faintly replied, "Because of you cheating and being intimate with another man, it made my spiritual power arise and become unstable. It seems to have accidentally triggered a restriction in the secret territory, so we were both sent to this place. I also don't really know where we currently are." "Who are you saying cheated?" Hushi angrily said. "I'm a doctor. My work is to help and treat people. Cheating your head." The chilliness within Nangongyu's eyes melted a little as he revealed a hint of delight, but in the blink of an eye it disappeared, changing into a look of confusion and grief. "But for him you stabbed me with a sword. In your heart, isn't he more important than me?" Hushi raised her eyebrows, her gaze couldn't help but land on Nangongyu's body. The always powerful and callous Hell King was at this moment wearing clothes filled with bloodstains. Chapter 264. Believe in your man. While carrying Hashi, Nangongyu exerted himself to turn around, then he gently pushed her to the side. Almost at the same time as she was in the air, Hashi turned her head to see behind her and noticed that a gigantic rock bird had appeared. The rock's whole body was light brown. When its two enormous wings were spread out, it almost covered the entire valley. Its sharp beak seemed to flash like the cold tip of a bent blade as it faced their direction, threateningly aiming to pierce them. The appearance of this rock was too sudden, as it had appeared without any warning at all. It was as if it had torn its way out of an invisible space, so even Hashi's divine senses hadn't detected it. However, Nangongyu had managed to sense it. Moreover, his first reaction was to shove Hashi aside. Unfortunately, the rock's powerful and sharp beak severely pierced Nangongyu's left shoulder during his protection of her. Blood instantly splattered everywhere, dyeing Nangongyu's body with blood, and adding an additional wound on top of his previous one. Nangongyu! Hashi screamed in fear and wanted to rush towards him. But the next moment she found out that she couldn't move, because her body was enveloped by a transparent spiritual barrier. She was confined by a void spiritual barrier. The moment Nangongyu had pushed her away, he had wrapped her in a void spiritual barrier to protect and confine her. What does that bastard think he's doing? Just then, Hashi saw Nangongyu stumble back several steps due to the impact, yet a corner of his mouth curled into a sneer. His hands suddenly gripped the rock's beak that was as solid as iron, and with all his strength, he lifted it up using its beak. Then, he ruthlessly smashed it to the ground. The strong smell of blood wafted towards the tip of Hashi's nose. Examining Nangongyu's bloody left shoulder, as well as the wound on the left side of his chest that had yet to stop bleeding, she could no longer bear it and yelled, "Nangongyu, you bastard, quickly release me." Although it was only for a short moment, Hashi had clearly sensed that Nangongyu's spiritual power was weakening. She recalled the warmth that had wrapped around her and protected her when space had ripped apart and twisted with that vortex, as well as Nangongyu's overly pale complexion. He must have expended too much spiritual power in that space distortion to protect her, and coupled with the injury on his chest, his current strength would be about 30% less than normal. However, that rock was a fierce beast with a horrible amount of spiritual power pressure. It was even more powerful than the golden python. How could the current Nangongyu deal with it and escape unscathed? After throwing the rock, Nangongyu's figure swayed slightly and his face paled further. When he heard Hashi's words, he laughed proudly. "Elevena, you have to believe in you, man." Just as his words faded, his right hand unfolded, and in a flash a dark, slender, and long sword appeared in his hand. A black aura curled upwards from the sword's body, and accompanied by the sword's spiritual power, the originally clear blue sky of the secret territory suddenly turned completely dark. Next, following lightning and thunder, a gale erupted. It was a force that slowly built up power in the valley, capable of extinguishing heaven and earth. And at this moment, the rock that had been knocked down stood up. But because of Nangongyu's attack, the feathers covering its entire body were now puffed up, while its brown beak was stained with blood. With its pair of fierce, bloodshot eyes, it appeared particularly frightening. Suddenly, the rock's wings fiercely flapped, creating a violent gale that mixed with sand and pebbles as it attacked Nangongyu. Hush's heart felt like it was being squeezed by something, and as she spoke, the voice escaping her mouth was hoarse and trembling. "Nangongyu, quickly release me, do you hear me?" Within the gale, Nangongyu's hair was being blown in every direction. His entire body was dyed red with blood and his clothes were disheveled. But nonetheless, he gave off a wild and unruly charm. Chapter 265. Will you die if you don't show off? A corner of his mouth lifted into a charming smile, and he said with a gentle voice, "Relax, I'll come to you after I finish dealing with this beast. Just obediently wait for me." After saying that, he waved his left hand. Following this, the void spiritual barrier suddenly soared into the air, bringing Hashi to a remote cave at the furthest corner of the valley. This place was far from the battlefield and was protected from the dark thunderclouds and gale. From here you could see the gale sweeping sand, pebbles, and grass into the air, and a space enveloped by a dark aura in the center of it all. The fierce battle was being carried out before her eyes, Yet she couldn't see or do anything to help. Suddenly, within the dark aura, there came a violent cacophony of loud sounds. Shortly afterwards, the rock soared high into the sky. It then waved its 100-meter-long wings, which made a sharp whistling sound echo throughout the valley. All the broken rocks in the valley were swept up by the gale, while all the vegetation was pulled up from the ground. Scattering everywhere, some even flew towards Hushi, but fortunately she was completely covered by the void spiritual barrier. Hushi's hands tightly clenched into fists when she saw Nangongyu fly like an arrow into the sky, leaving only a shadow as he faced the rock. As one black and one yellowish-brown shadow collided in the air, it sent a terrible shockwave throughout the valley. It was as if fireworks bloomed magnificently in the sky as brown feathers rained down as far as the eye could see, while a thick smell of blood filled the sky. Imprisoned in the cave, Hushi at this moment sensed that the energy of the void spiritual barrier was gradually weakening, which meant that Nangongyu's spiritual energy was also gradually weakening. She was so anxious it felt like she was being burnt alive as she constantly pounded against the void spiritual barrier, but all to no avail. Suddenly, a shrill bird cry pierced her ears and a glaringly bright flash of thunder lit up the sky, lighting up a black shadow savagely slicing the rock from its neck, straight to its heart. Hushi stared blankly at the sky, completely oblivious to the void spiritual barrier disappearing. With a tremendous thud that echoed loudly throughout the valley, the rock's dead body fell from the sky and smashed a huge hole into the ground. Then, Nangongyu slowly descended from the sky still holding his sword and landed beside the rock. Hushi heaved a sigh of relief. Loosening the fists she'd clenched so tightly that she'd hurt her palms, she then quickly ran towards him. Unfortunately, once she was close enough to Nangongyu and could clearly see his appearance, she sucked in a cold breath. Other than his face, Nangongyu's entire body was filled with wounds. And since he was absolutely drenched in blood, it gave off the impression that he had been bathing in it. One of his hands hung powerlessly at his side, displaying evidently that his bone was broken. But even if this was the case, when Nangongyu saw her, a corner of his mouth raised to expose an affectionate smile. "Elevena, did you see that? Just as I said before, I'm your man and I'll definitely be able to protect you." Hushi's heart suddenly slowed with a sour and painful twinge as an incomparable anger and worry rushed forth one after another, causing the choked voice that left her mouth to tremble. "Nangongyu, will you die if you don't show off? Who wants to be protected by you?" Although she was speaking like that, she still immediately took out her silver needles and quickly stood before Nangongyu. Acting like it wasn't worth anything, she continuously poured precious ninth secluded spring water onto his wounds and stuffed his mouth with medicinal pills. For the first time, Hushi's hands were cold and trembling as she held her silver needles. She didn't want to admit it, but she'd been so scared and frightened when the void spiritual barrier had weakened little by little. Nangongyu grabbed Hushi's small hands that were cold and trembling, softly saying, "Elevena, don't worry, I'm all right." "Who was worried?" Hushi angrily responded while gnashing her teeth. Nangongyu reached out his hand to gently rub at the redness in corners of her eyes, his voice soft and husky as it reached her ears. "MH, I was worried. Worried that I have no way to protect you, worried that Elevena will think that I'm not good enough, and worried that you're like other men." Chapter 266. I'll never let go. His warm breath tickled Hushi's ear and made it burn, so she quickly edged further away. This guy simply didn't care about his life. His injuries were obviously serious. For an ordinary person, getting this badly hurt would be fatal, but he was acting like he wasn't even the one who was injured. The absorption rate of ninth secluded spring water was 100 times more powerful when compared to other normal healing medicines. So using the spring water, Hushi poured some on his wounds, while the rest she made him drink. Color slowly began restoring itself to Nangongyu's pale complexion, while the garish wounds on his body began to rapidly heal at a speed visible to the naked eye. However, Nangongyu's body had many injuries, and most of them were so deep that even his bones could be seen. Even if they healed, sinister scars would still remain. When Hushi examined those scars, her brows couldn't help crease as it reminded her of that extremely disturbing battle scene and the fear in her heart. Nangongyu laughed lightly as he teased her. "Oh, the wounds are extremely ugly, huh? Does Elevena dislike me now?" Hashi clenched her teeth to suppress the hoarseness and choked tone in her voice, fiercely responding, "Yes. So ugly that just looking at them is irksome." Nangongyu raised his eyebrows, shamelessly pressing closer to Hashi as he whispered, "Don't most people say that a man with a scarred body is sexy?" Hashi was treating the bone fracture on his arm, and when she heard that, her movement of pressing her hands on his wound momentarily slowed. "If other people think you're sexy, then you can go and find them," Hashi sneered. Nangongyu released a muffled groan, his face showing a pained expression. Following this, his pained expression turned into one of grief with his long eyelashes slightly hanging down. "Now you know what pain feels like." Hashi's heart couldn't bear it, and the voice that left her mouth was unyielding as she applied excessive pressure to his wound. "In the future, let's see if you dare not treasure your life. As long as Hashi is by my side, no matter how heavy the injury, this king won't be afraid." Nangongyu abruptly reached out his uninjured hand to wrap it around her slender waist, pulling her into his embrace. "Elevenor, you won't leave me, right? No matter where you go, I'll always follow you. I'll absolutely never let you go. Always follow me. Are you a malicious spirit?" Hashi glared at him, then she turned to free herself from his arms. She no longer wanted to pay attention to this man's shameless words. Instead, all of her energy was being spent on treating Nangongyu's injuries. Whether it was the horrible scars or the broken arm, while all of them were terrible to see, in actuality they weren't that big of a deal. With Hashi's medical skills and the ability of a nascent soul-stage martial artist's powerful regeneration and healing, she could guarantee that within a few days Nangongyu would be completely recovered. Rather, the most troublesome part was the excessive amount of spiritual power that Nangongyu had consumed when he was fighting with the rock. Due to such a depletion of spiritual power, his meridians were burnt in many places, and they would need time to be nursed back to health. After some thought, Hashi took out a decoction used to restore meridians that was made of high-grade spiritual herbs that grew in her space, and water from the 9th secluded spirit spring. However, when she went to pass the decoction to Nangongyu, he shook his head without hesitation. "Elevenor, you can see that I'm currently unable to move freely, so why don't you feed me instead?" "Hashi, it was only your right hand that was fractured, your left hand is still okay. How come you can't drink the medicine on your own?" Nangongyu turned his head to the side, unwilling to look at the black medicinal liquid in Hashi's hands any longer. With a gloomy and sad face, he said, "You personally gave Jiyu Liufeng, that brat, acupuncture treatment. Your hands even touched his body, yet you refused to feed me. Elevenor, in your heart, am I less important than him?" A corner of Hashi's mouth twitched, she refused to say a word. Nangongyu's expression filled with resentment and sadness, and suddenly grabbing his black long sword, he used it to support his body as he stood up. Chapter 267. Protect you throughout this lifetime. Unfortunately, with his spiritual power currently depleted and his physical strength completely exhausted, before he could properly get up he staggered and heavily fell to the ground. "Nangongyu!" Hashi rushed to support him, cold sweat appearing on her spine due to fright. "Are you unwilling to live anymore?" Nangongyu's jet-black eyes were scorching hot as they stared fixedly at her. Just half an hour ago he still had the appearance of a monster that could extinguish the world, but now he looked like a pitiful dog with his watery eyes. Hashi felt defeated by him and ultimately, she picked up the bowl on the side, then unhappily said, "Okay, I'll feed you." "Lord Hell King." A corner of his mouth slightly raised. Regardless of Hashi's opposition, half of his upper body leaned against her as he happily accepted Hashi feeding him the medicine. Occasionally he would touch Hashi's soft and delicate cheek, his expression one of satisfied contentment. But after barely being fed 2 spoonfuls, his hand touched Hashi's wound on her left shoulder and realized that it felt cold. Instantly his eyes darkened and the glint of a cold light flashed within them. Hashi was just about to feed him the 3rd spoonful of medicine when she abruptly felt a warmth on her shoulder. Then, a burst of spiritual power covered the wound on her left shoulder. For a split second, her cold body and frozen to the point of numb left shoulder instantly restored to their original condition. Hashi's eyes widened. Nangongyu, this guy. Obviously, his spiritual power was depleted, and with great difficulty, He was finally able to restore some, but now he'd used it to treat her minor injury. Is there something wrong with this guy's brain? While Hashi had still been inside the secret territory's Zijin Palace, she'd naturally sustained an extremely heavy injury, but it was mainly the depletion of her spiritual power and she hadn't had enough time to recover it yet. After drinking some of her spiritual spring water, she'd felt much better. And as for the injury on her shoulder, she'd intended to transfer her spiritual energy around the wound to expel the cold air and help it to naturally heal. Compared to the current condition of Nangongyu's injury, Hashi's small injury was simply nothing. Yet just as Hashi was about to say something, she heard Nangongyu's dark voice vowing in her ears, "Elevener, believe in me, I'll protect you throughout this lifetime." Hashi's body slightly startled and her heart felt as if it was being scratched by something. It was itchy, yet gentle. However, very quickly, she remembered the scene that she'd seen not too long ago. Nangongyu had turned around to examine the extent of Feng Lianying's injury, leaving Hashi behind. Furthermore, for Feng Lianying, he'd pierced Jiyu Liufeng with a sword. The fire in her heart instantly extinguished as if cold water was poured on it, like the frigid winter wind blowing into a warm room. Hashi's complexion hardened and became cold as she indifferently said, "Nangongyu, since it's an impossible thing to do, why even promise in the first place? You only dare to say it while we're in the secret territory, but if I really killed Feng Lianying, would you honestly let me off?" Nangongyu blankly stared at Hashi, watching as a corner of her mouth lifted into a cold smile as she said, "You said that you'll protect me throughout this lifetime, so if I tell you that the injury on my body was caused by Feng Lianying, what would you do? Would you kill your beloved little sister Lianying?" Nangongyu's body stiffened slightly and he lowered his eyes to hide the surging emotions within them. Sensing the icy atmosphere and alienation being projected from Hashi's body, he really wanted to say something. Unfortunately, due to circumstances, he had to swallow back the words that were already on the tip of his tongue. Nangongyu stayed silent, as she'd expected. Seeing this, although Hashi had long ago prepared her heart, an unspeakable disappointment and rage still surged within her heart. She sneered and said, "Jiyu Liufeng and I merely injured her a little and yet you couldn't wait to choke me. If I'd really killed her, weren't you going to want my life in revenge? Nangongyu, even though things are like this, you still dared to say that you'll protect me throughout this lifetime? Don't make me laugh." Chapter 268. I would rather not. After Hashi's words left her mouth, Nangongyu suddenly reached out his hand to pull her into his embrace. In his eyes, there was a burning red light that hinted at countless suppressed emotions and patience, like a dam threatening to burst at any time. "Elevener, do you really think that I would ever harm you? Even if I had to choke myself, I still wouldn't be willing to hurt even a strand of your hair. I said that I wouldn't allow anyone to hurt you, and that includes myself." Hashi wanted to fiercely knock Nangongyu's hands away, however, while his health was obviously poorly, the strength he used to confine her was unbreakable. Even the wound on his arm that had already been bandaged began to unravel due to the strain he was exerting. Hashi stopped struggling and grinding her teeth. She said, "You said that you won't allow anyone to hurt me, but you used your hands against Jiyu Liufeng. Nangongyu, you have to know that if it wasn't for him saving me, I would have died long ago by Feng Lianying's hands. Haha, I was foolish. How could I have ever believed that your spotless, pure, and kind-hearted little sister Lianying would be so malicious as to attempt to kill me?" The sharp redness in Nangongyu's eyes flashed, while his face showed the mixed expressions of coldness and distress. "Elevener, I believe every word you've said. You believe me and yet you still want to kill Jiyu Liufeng? Isn't the reason you want to kill Jiyu Liufeng due to him injuring your little sister Lianying? If it was switched to me being the one who wanted to kill Feng Lianying, wouldn't you even want to kill me? Elevener, do you have to be so dense?" Nangongyu asked as he stared at her with a grief-filled expression. Hashi was confused. What did that mean? "I wanted to kill Jiyu Liufeng, not because of Feng Lianying, but because you were too close to him and ignored me. You healed him, yet you didn't even look at me, and in order to save him, you opposed me without hesitation." Hashi raised her head to look at Nangongyu, only to see that his head was turned to the side with an uncomfortable expression on his face. There was even an obvious blush coloring his ear. So it wasn't because Jiu Liufeng had injured Feng Lianying, rather, it was because she and Jiu Liufeng had been too close that Nangongyu wanted to kill him? What did that mean? Don't tell me that the supremely dignified Hell King would unexpectedly admit such jealousy. Under Hushi's unfathomable gaze, Nangongyu was somewhat embarrassed. Suddenly, his hands reached out to pull her into his embrace, then he fiercely said, "Elevena, you're mine. No one except me can touch you. If I run into such a situation again in the future, even if you're angry, I will still do it again. I'll never let off any man who dares attempt to make a move on you." Chapter 269, Risking One's Life for Adventure. Her? Hushi was stunned. What does it have to do with me? Nangongyu pulled her closer and laughed. It's exactly like how I help you to get rid of the flies around you. You're also responsible for driving away the women around me. Hushi's expression blanked out for a while as she watched Nangongyu's handsome face slowly edging closer to her. Such a world-toppling face was now enlarged before her eyes with a tender and loving smile gracing his lips. It was just like a scorching sun dazzling people's eyes. "Elevena, you should know that all the women throughout the Jinling Kingdom want to marry this king and are lined up from Yangjing City, all the way to Yuyang City. This king won't disturb them, but since you're my princess, it's naturally your duty to drive those women away. Don't you agree?" Hushi felt his hot breath fanning her neck, while his bright eyes burned as they stared at her, seeming to swallow her whole. Her mind was in chaos as she abruptly struggled to get away from Nangongyu, and with a taut expression, she said, "You, stop imagining that your love is reciprocated with an uninterested person who would want to help you drive away those women. As long as you don't provoke me, it wouldn't be any of my business even if you were flooded by flies." Nangongyu still wanted to say something, but he was fiercely pushed to the ground by Hushi's palms filled with spiritual power. Picking up the bowl of medicine on the ground, she fiercely said, "So, do you want to drink this medicine or not? If not, then should I throw this medicine away?" Nangongyu noticed that although her expression was fierce, the depressed emotion filling her eyes had started to decrease. Unable to help it, he heaved a sigh of relief, then quickly took the medicine from Hushi's hand and obediently drank it. After drinking the medicine, Nangongyu inspected their surroundings and saw that there was no longer a visible crack in the space they were currently in. Unfortunately, a trace of concern still remained within his heart. "Elevena, this place must be a rift in the secret territory. Because it's existed for many years and gone through multiple spiritual energy surges, it's connected itself to a separate section of the secret territory." Nangongyu easily used the black sword in his hand to draw a line, tracing out a space of around 100 square meters. That rock was a 6th-rank spiritual beast, and a 6th-rank spiritual beast is already considered to be amongst one of the more powerful spiritual beasts. If the rock left its smell in an area, even if other spiritual beasts were to enter, they wouldn't easily dare approach. "Elevena, during the time I move my spiritual energy in meditation, you can't leave this area." Although there were still a lot of things Nangongyu wanted to say, he held them in. In the sealed dragon domain there were countless hidden sections full of unknown dangers, all similar to high-level spiritual beasts like the rock. For a martial artist, entering one of the sealed dragon domain's hidden sections was really like risking one's life for adventure. Even though Nangongyu was arrogant, he wasn't conceited. While he had the ability to defend himself, he didn't dare promise that he would be able to enter and escape with Hushi in one piece. This was the reason why he hadn't let Hushi know about the sealed dragon domain. At this very moment, in Nangongyu's storage ring, countless treasures and medicinal pills were stored. All of them were capable of causing fights between Foundation Establishment stage, Meridian stage, and even Gold Core stage martial artists. These were things that he had specially scoured every corner of the secret territory for, in order to give them to Hushi after he had left. Nangongyu's woman, was someone he wanted to protect properly, but he also wanted to give her the best presents to make her happy. If Hushi was willing, he would gladly accompany her to other secret territories suitable for Foundation Establishment stage and Meridian stage martial artists to help her advance in the future. However, It was currently suicidal for her to enter such a dangerous place as the sealed dragon domain. But it was now too late for those words, so Nangong-yu kept his mouth shut. Since Hashi was already here, no matter what, he would thoroughly protect her at all costs. Chapter 270. Hop up. Taking advantage of Nangong-yu's meditation to digest the 9th secluded spring water and the spiritual energy from the medicine, Hashi began to examine the rock's dead body. Unlike the golden python's broken bones, the rock's flesh was still intact, so the whole body could be collected. The rock's body was too broken by Nangong-yu's strikes, while the sharp beak and claws that could have been used to make weapons were almost completely damaged by Nangong-yu's sword. Knowing that only 30 to 40% of Nangong-yu's strength remained, but that he was still able to beat a 6th-rank spiritual beast to such a miserable pulp, Hashi's heart couldn't help but quiver. In the end, just how strong was this guy's real strength? After Nangong-yu finished absorbing the medicine's energy, he temporarily froze his internal energy to give his body time to recuperate, because although the rock's smell was currently lingering in the area, there was also the strong stench of blood. This, coupled with the unstable cracks in their present space, meant that it wouldn't be safe to stay in this place for a long period of time. Just as he finished converging his spiritual energy and raised his head, he saw Hashi with her sleeves rolled up and readying herself to sort out the rock's dead body. He couldn't help smiling as he said, "Although a lot of spiritual power is contained within the rock's flesh, an unpleasant smell of urine lingers on it which is hard to remove and causes it to be hard to swallow. 11er, if you're interested in the rock's corpse, just take its inner core, the rest isn't useful." Ignoring him, Hashi used a sharp dagger to cut down the rock's flesh, following along its veins. Without raising her head, she then answered, "Oh, it doesn't taste good. Then you won't get to eat any." After saying that, she threw the last piece of meat smeared with blood into her space. Then, lifting her head, the perspiration trickled down her hair onto her smooth white forehead. Her phoenix-like eyes were glistening brightly just like stars as they stared up at him. Nangong-yu was fascinated by her lofty face and he couldn't help but laugh involuntarily. "Okay, I was wrong. I forgot that the most unpalatable of foods can be made into the most wonderful of treats in my 11er's hands. My 11er is amazing." Hashi snorted coldly. "Nonsense. Are you done absorbing the medicine's energy? Where are we going next?" Nangong-yu pointed his finger at the top of the cliff. "Anyway, let's leave this valley first, we'll discuss this again later." After saying that, he used the black sword in his hand as a prop and slowly went to stand up. But before he could stand up straight, he staggered and almost fell back to the ground. Hashi immediately gripped his wrist and carefully started examining the vein located there. The more she checked, the more pronounced the crease between her brows became. While Nangong-yu's body had now been replenished with a lot of spiritual energy, this spiritual energy, however, had gathered in his dantian and wasn't able to spread to his meridians. Because the injury in his meridians was somewhat serious, it needs some time to self-heal. Moreover, his stamina had been almost completely used up, so it wouldn't recover within such a short amount of time. Hashi frowned as she looked at the high cliff, vaguely making out the tip of it through the layer of clouds. With Nangong-yu's current body, it would be too difficult for him to climb up, yet it would also be too dangerous if they didn't leave as they were near an unstable crack in space. "You, hop up," Hashi said as she suddenly stood in front of Nangong-yu, her back facing him. Nangong-yu was stunned to the point of standing still, and for a long while he didn't make a sound until Hashi once again urged him to hop up. Then, coughing lightly, he said, "Actually, I can go up by myself." Hashi turned to glare at him. "If you want to add another wound to your previous one, go ahead and climb up by yourself, but if a 6th-rank spiritual beast appears again, I'll have to fight it alone." Nangong-yu's expression was somewhat uncomfortable and his jade-like white complexion was slightly flushed as Hashi glared at him. "So," he then grudgingly said, "this king's legendary reputation is going to be ruined by 11er hands." Chapter 271. A purple abyss vine. After saying that, he leaned his body forward onto Hashi's back and without hesitation, his hands encircled her slender waist. Hashi only felt something warm envelope her and was completely unaware of the weight she was now supporting. Instead, all her senses were concentrated to his lips as they slowly exhaled beside her ear. I entrust this king's lifelong happiness to Eleanor's hands. Eleanor, you have to take responsibility. Responsibility, your sister. Hashi grabbed Nangongyu's hands and gathering all her spiritual power, she then soared into the sky towards the top of the valley. The whistling wind passing their ears brought with it a gust of cold air, yet the man on her back was keeping her extremely warm. For a moment, Hashi's mind wandered. It seemed like it was only an hour ago when they were on opposing sides and on the brink of severing their relationship. But now, it had become a situation of dependency regarding life or death. Fate really loved to tease people. What sort of future would there be between Nangongyu and herself? The cliff of the valley was really high, so even though Hashi's spiritual power was almost depleted, they still weren't able to see the peak. Fortunately, not too far away there was a cave in the cliff wall, allowing her to temporarily catch her breath and replenish her spiritual power. Landing steadily in front of the cave, Hashi was able to examine it up close and realized that while it looked shallow at first glance, it actually led deeper into the cliff wall. It only appeared shallow because it was covered by a thick layer of wisteria. However, this wisteria was quite strange as its branches were transparent and with a closer look, you could see a liquid flowing inside of it. Hashi couldn't help herself and took 2 steps closer to take a look at it. Suddenly, Nangongyu's voice sounded in her ears, "Careful, this is a 5th-rank spiritual plant, purple abyss vine." Unfortunately, Nangongyu's warning came just a breath too late. Hashi's finger had barely brushed against the plant when she felt a strong wind attack aiming towards her face. The harmless-looking purple vines of a moment ago had moved together like a whip and thrashed themselves towards Hashi's body. Hashi was shocked and quickly retreated several steps, but the speed of the purple vines was faster. Furthermore, every vine heading towards her seemed to have the striking strength of a Meridian stage martial artist. Yet, just as Hashi was about to be hit, the sound of lightning abruptly crackled and echoed by her ears. The purple vines were struck by this wave of lightning and stopped, seeming to be hurt as they trembled along the ground. Several of the vines were completely burnt by the lightning and quickly shrunk back towards the cave entrance. Nangongyu quickly pulled Hashi behind his back, and holding up the black sword in his hand, he prepared to attack the purple vines. But Hashi suddenly gripped Nangongyu's hand and said with exasperation, "Nangongyu, are you crazy? Even now you're still daring to use spiritual power. Are you looking for death?" Nangongyu froze, and before he had time to recover, he'd already been dragged behind Hashi's back. Next, a powerful earth attribute barrier appeared to protect him and keep him firmly behind her. "Just obediently wait in there for me. If you dare move, then don't blame me for being rude." Seeing the girl's slim back blocking him from harm, Nangongyu became momentarily stunned. For the first time, there was someone who treated him like a treasure and willingly stood in front of him to protect him. This feeling was very strange, yet also tremendously wonderful, causing his entire heart to feel sweet and sour as if it was soaked in honey. Why was his Eleanor always so special? Currently, though, Hashi was focusing on the danger before them. How would she know that behind her Nangongyu's head was lost in thought? Seeing the purple vine's second attack heading their way, Hashi's heart lurched and she abruptly gathered her spiritual power. In the blink of an eye, a golden flame condensed into a spectacularly patterned ball on her fingertips before she quickly smashed it towards the purple abyss vine. Chapter 272. Spiritual demon plants were afraid of fire, so sure enough, as soon as the fireball touched the purple abyss vine it instantly started burning. However, unexpectedly, even though the purple abyss vine was bathed in the fire, it didn't seem frightened like it had when it was being struck by the lightning. Instead, it seemed to tremendously enjoy the fire. All of its purple vines swayed gently in the flames, and at the same time, the spiritual power contained within the fire seemed to be diminishing. These purple vines were actually devouring the spiritual fire. A moment later, all of the golden flames were completely extinguished. Hush's expression became grave as she prepared to withstand the purple abyss vine's next wave of attack. However, the purple abyss vine once again responded beyond her expectations. They indeed moved towards Hushi, but it had no intention of attacking her. Rather, it entangled itself around Hush's feet and body with an action similar to fawning and acting coquettishly. Raising its sturdiest vine in front of her, it then swayed it to and fro. This pose made it seem like it was asking for something. For a moment Hushi was dumbstruck. Could it be that this purple vine was an M? Did it enjoy being attacked and wanted more? During this time, Nangongyu standing behind her stepped forward and taking out a porcelain bottle filled with ninth secluded spring water, he poured 2 drops onto the purple vine swaying in front of Hushi. In the next instant, the scene unfolding before Hushi caused her further shock. The leaves of the purple abyss vine suddenly started emitting the hint of a violet light, and during this, they all stood straight up and swayed in sync. Hushi could have sworn that if there was music, the purple vines would have been dancing around in a lively manner. After moving about for a while in a synchronized dance, the violet light faded without a trace and the sturdier vines once again eagerly wrapped themselves around Hushi, this time including Nangongyu in its fawning. Then, almost as if it was impatiently begging, it rubbed its leaves together to make a rustling sound. Hushi still hadn't completely come to terms with what had just happened when she heard Nangongyu slowly speaking as he narrowed his eyes. "You want this?" As he shook the porcelain bottle in front of the purple vines, it immediately started swaying in exuberance. If it hadn't been afraid that Nangongyu would attack it with lightning like before, it would have already snatched the bottle away. Hushi, however, was stunned. "It can understand what we're saying?" Nangongyu answered, "There aren't that many 5th-rank spiritual plants capable of using divine sense, but the purple abyss vine is one of them and is therefore known as a spiritual demon plant. Spiritual demon plants can generally communicate with people like spirit pets." After saying that, Nangongyu looked at Hushi with affection in his eyes. "11er, you have a muddled dantian and possess the spiritual power of all 5 elements, so advancing the spiritual root of your wood attribute is immensely important for you. Although the rank of this purple abyss vine isn't particularly high, it's still useful. Moreover, it's possible for it to advance in the future, so you should take it as your spirit pet." Hearing that, Hushi's heart was moved. You could say that possessing the spiritual power of all 5 elements would make Hushi exceptionally powerful, but at the same time, the road of ascension was also tremendously more difficult when compared to other martial artists. Since she was still a low-level martial artist, it wasn't too bad, though, as she could only accumulate a certain amount of spiritual power. But if she wanted to advance to gold core stage in the future, she would inevitably need to make a breakthrough on the spiritual power of all 5 elements. This would help to balance her spiritual power and raise her chances of succeeding. It wasn't too difficult for her to advance the dual attributes of fire and water, but for several other elements, she had yet to find a method to help advance them. So in regards to this, it would definitely be useful for her to take a wood attribute spirit pet. But while many people took in all sorts of spirit pets, most of them were beast pets. How many of them were able to subdue plant spirit pets? Would the purple abyss vine really want to be her spirit pet? Chapter 273, Subdue. Thinking of it, Hushi frowned until she suddenly felt Nangongyu lightly scrape the tip of her nose, his voice filled with a teasing tone as he smiled. "Little fool, of course, it's not easy for other people to subdue spiritual demon plants, but you have something they like the most, spiritual spring water. Don't tell me you still don't know how to bargain with them." When she heard that, Hushi was unable to refute Nangongyu and quickly spread out her left hand. In an instant, spiritual spring water started to slowly condense in her delicate white palm. Sure enough, once the purple abyss vine sensed the rich and fragrant spiritual energy, it immediately climbed up and wrapped itself around Hushi's arm like a child wanting to grab spiritual food. While the purple abyss vine was greedily absorbing the spiritual energy, Nangongyu took advantage of the situation to immediately grab Hushi's right hand and gently bite one of her fingers. The scarlet blood then seeped out to slowly drip onto the purple abyss vine. In a split second, an intense violet light constantly pulsed around the vines, causing them to stand up straight and make a rustling sound. It was almost like it was angry and tried to resist by desperately struggling. Hush's eyes frosted over and she coldly said, "You wanted spiritual spring water, so naturally you have to pay the price. I, Hashi, hereby promise that as long as you become my spirit pet, in the future I'll allow you to drink as much ninth secluded spirit spring water as you want." After she finished speaking, the purple abyss vine suddenly stopped shaking and struggling. Yet the leaves still continued to move and make a rustling sound like it was in an intense discussion. Eventually, all of the purple abyss vine stopped swaying and it moved in front of Hushi. Her blood, including the spiritual spring water on her palm, slowly disappeared into the purple abyss vine's body. The next moment, a violet light gleamed on her palm. The mark of a purple vine then flashed before it slowly disappeared from view. Hashi used her divine sense to internally inspect her body and found that the purple abyss vine really was residing within her. Focusing her mind and stretching out her right hand, she watched as a purple vine was instantly released and hit a huge rock on one side of the cave. In the blink of an eye, the huge rock was crushed into dust. This process was extremely fast and the sound was very faint, so if you weren't watching carefully, it would have been easy to miss it. All it took was the flash of a purple light, and it looked like the huge rock was shattered due to the weather. Hashi was satisfied as she returned the purple abyss vine into her body. She found that the purple abyss vine could freely lengthen and shorten according to her thoughts, and moreover, its speed was extremely fast. It was definitely more effective to use than her previous bone whip. But while Hashi was satisfied, the purple abyss vine within her body was very unhappy and continuously protested. Although spiritual demon plants usually couldn't speak, the owner of the contract could generally understand what they meant anyway. As a result, Hashi felt like there was a voice in her head constantly scolding her for not keeping her word and being untrustworthy. Hashi didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Focusing once more, she moved the purple abyss vine into her space, leaving only a short length of vine within her body as a weapon. However, when the purple abyss vine was moved into her space, Hashi discovered a strange thing. She could actually see the state of her space even though she wasn't currently in it. She could even see Dandan and little golden dragon lying on the edge of the spirit spring, Dandan's broken voice ringing in her ears. Although the little golden dragon was still in a coma, she could tell that the two little guys' bodies were recovering, which made her heavy heart feel relieved. Chapter 274. The Perfect Wife. Without the purple abyss vine obstructing her sight, Hashi could now clearly see the cave on the cliff. It was a cave made entirely out of rock, and except for the purple abyss vine, there weren't any traces of other plants or small reptiles around. The cave entrance wasn't large and only allowed for 2 people to enter at the same time, but when inside, they found that the inside was exceptionally wide. They were unsure if it was because there weren't any snakes, rats, ants, or any sort of plant, but the atmosphere inside the cave was fresh and dry. Hashi had originally intended to bring Nangongyu to the top of the cliff, but now it seemed that this cave that had been guarded by the purple abyss vine was more secure than an unknown cliff. It also seemed more suitable for healing. Nangongyu brought out a huge night pearl to light up the entire cave, while Hashi removed all the items of furniture she had stored in her space. Big items such as a large bed, table, and chairs, and small items such as food, tableware, and chopsticks. Everything that a person could think of was brought out one by one. This was also the difference between Hashi and other martial artists. An ordinary martial artist storage space ring wasn't so large, and with only a small space, they were barely able to store treasures and medicinal pills, so why would they be willing to store such insignificant things like these? But Hush's space was extremely large. So even though she was removing things like the table and chairs that she had placed in a corner of the Spirit Firmament Palace, it still wasn't anywhere near full. All her things in the Spirit Firmament Palace were organized by category, so she wasn't worried at all that storing junk like this would take up the room she could use for treasure items. Since she could enjoy the pleasure of having such plentiful resources, Hashi had never treated her people unfairly, and she was naturally willing to make her adventurous life more comfortable. Hashi supported Nangongyu and helped him to lie on the large soft bed, but instead of cultivating right away, he chose to smile as he watched Hashi busily moving back and forth. And as he was watching, his expression slowly became more and more gentle. When Hashi turned around, she caught sight of Nangongyu smiling joyfully as he looked at her. With his handsome face shining under the light of the night pearl, it made him seem like a seductive demon and caused her heart to palpitate like crazy. Looking displeased, she glared at him and asked, "What are you laughing about? Didn't you say that you wanted to recover from your injury as soon as possible? Why haven't you started cultivating yet?" Nangongyu slowly sat up and faintly laughed, "Because I was reluctant to remove my eyes from you." Currently, Elevena seems like a hard-working little wife busy looking after her husband. Well, to have such a perfect wife, this king is really blessed with the fortune of 3 lifetimes. Dream on. Hashi grabbed one of the pillows on the bed and smacked him over the head with it. "Who's your wife?" Being heavily hit by the pillow, Nangongyu uttered a muffled groan and bowed his head in pain. It wasn't a soft cotton pillow, but rather a weighty buckwheat pillow. So although not completely convinced that the great Hell King would be hurt by a buckwheat pillow, Hashi still couldn't help but worriedly move a few steps closer to him. "Hey, are you okay?" But before she had even finished asking, Hashi suddenly felt a strong force grab her, and for a moment, she felt herself spinning in the air. Once she recovered her sense of balance, she realized that she had been dragged onto the bed by Nangongyu and was now firmly pinned beneath him. Nangongyu gazed down at her while the two of them were so close together, and within Nangongyu's pitch-black eyes, it seemed like there was a brightly burning flame. Being watched like that caused Hashi to be flustered, and she moved her hands and feet to struggle free. However, purely comparing their strengths, she was nowhere near Nangongyu's match. She wanted to use spiritual power to free herself, but she was worried about his injuries, so she didn't dare act rashly. Unfortunately, this left her trapped in an impossible situation. Using her hands, she forcefully pushed at Nangongyu's chest and angrily shouted, "What are you doing? Quickly let me go, otherwise, don't blame me for being impolite." Nangongyu bowed his head and his black, silk-like long hair caressed the side of Hashi's face. With the ends of his hair sweeping across the side of her face, she felt a startlingly numb feeling spread throughout her body. Chapter 275. Will never let her off. Hashi felt her heart beating wildly in her chest and became anxious to get out of Nangongyu's arms, but then she heard his dark and husky voice slowly saying, "Never, I'll never let you go. Elevena, just accept your fate. In this life, you're mine." Nangongyu then lowered his head and slowly inched towards the soft pink cherry lips he always thought about. It was such a sweet taste, an ecstasy he felt down to his bones and one that he had missed for many days. However, the second before his lips landed, Hashi slightly turned her small face to the side and made his warm kiss land on a corner of her mouth. Although he had made contact with her exquisite skin and could smell her sweet fragrance, which was extremely alluring, the originally hot atmosphere in the cave was slowly becoming colder. Nangongyu could feel Hashi's resistance and disaffection towards him. When Hashi turned her head back, her gaze was frozen as she decisively stared at him and slowly opened her mouth to say, "Nangongyu, no matter how pleasant it is to hear your confession, there are still some things I have to tell you first. Feng Lianying, I will definitely kill her. I don't care who she is or how powerful her backers are, I absolutely refuse to let her off. One day I'll make her pay me back what she owes me 100 times. Hush's voice was ice cold and filled with a resolute tone. With the trace of murderous intent mixed in, it made those who had previously heard it become colder than they were before. She admitted that her current skill was inferior and that she was still unable to kill Feng Lianying, with no possible way to confront the Liu Li sect. But just because she wasn't currently capable of it, that didn't mean that it wouldn't be possible in the future. She, Hashi, had always paid a debt of gratitude with kindness, and revenge with hatred. She wouldn't let anyone off who dared provoke her people. Even if she had to oppose Nangongyu, she still wouldn't hesitate to even the score. One day, she would establish her own power, so that the people in this world won't dare to easily humiliate her again. For all of this, she could only depend on herself and not rely on other people. Nangongyu stared in a daze at Hushi's burning and shining eyes that were like an unfathomable clear pond. They resembled an unpredictable ocean, so arrogant, so conceited, but also so completely breathtaking. This was his 11er. A complicated look flashed across Nangongyu's face, and within his deep eyes, an intense emotion was surging. After a brief internal battle, he ultimately bit his tongue to withhold the words wanting to free themselves from his mouth. Hushi wasn't surprised that Nangongyu didn't answer her, and without waiting for him to come up with excuses, she firmly pushed him off her to get up and indifferently said, "You stay in here to heal properly, I'll go guard outside." In any case, Nangongyu had sustained an injury when he'd saved her, so she would always remember this favor. Just as Hushi went to quickly leave the cave, Nangongyu's soft voice came from behind her filled with affection and sadness. "11er, 11er." He gently called her name twice, and then that hoarse and magnetic voice disappeared into faint sighs. He obviously didn't say anything, but Hushi felt like there was the trace of a wound on her heart. Her steps slightly faltered, and then, no longer wanting to stay, she left the cave. Hushi walked out of the cave and took a deep breath, finding that it was only then that her anxiousness could calm down. Releasing the purple abyss vine, she restored it to its original form to cover the cave entrance once again. When the purple abyss vine saw Hushi, it immediately started to sway vigorously. It seemed extremely joyous but also very excited. Whether it was just an illusion, Hushi felt that even though the purple abyss vine was only in her space for a short period of time, it seemed a lot sturdier and solid. The leaves were also plumper, while its originally transparent purple stems and leaves seemed darker too. Chapter 276. The one who causes distress. Hushi watched it sway in obvious excitement, even though its thick vines were still motionless. However, she noticed that it looked as if it was eating and digesting food. A corner of Hushi's mouth twitched, and pushing aside the purple abyss vine's branch that was stretching over to fawn before her, she gave it a few orders and then entered her space. She made sure to attach a part of her divine sense to the purple abyss vine though, that way she would be able to keep a close eye on her surroundings. As soon as she entered her space, she heard the sad sobbing of Dandan. Sensing a new presence in the space, Dandan suddenly whipped his head around like a bird startled by the snapping of a twig. When he saw that it was just Hushi, he immediately leapt into her arms. "Mother, what? I thought that I'd never see you again, Mother." Dandan's cries were extremely heart-wrenching, as if he wanted to vent out all of the fear and worry that he'd been carrying these past few hours. Currently, Dandan's body had reverted back to his original appearance, but his previous round, smooth, and tender body had now become flat. His body color now also appeared a little transparent, displaying the look of one in poor health and undernourished. Hushi pinched his small round face with a sad expression on her face and reproachfully said, "In the future, you're not allowed to take your own safety as a joke, do you hear me? Even if it's to save me, you can't do it." When Dandan was still incubating, he had practically needed to absorb a city's worth of spiritual energy before he was able to break out of his shell. In fact, while his body contained an extreme amount of formidable power, that same amount of power represented his life source. If the power was ever halved and weakened, he would return to the shape of an egg and possibly even lose his life. Acting like a spoiled child, Dandan continuously rubbed his head against Hushi's chest. Seeing him ignoring her words, Hushi couldn't help but say, "Dandan, even if I die, as long as this Shumi space still exists you can survive and you won't have to return to being an egg. Once the space has a new owner, you can still live happily. You've been lonely living an egg for so many years, so do you want to become an egg again? In the future you should be obedient and avoid taking unnecessary risks. Do you understand?" "I don't want that." Dandan tightly clutched at Hushi's hair while his small mouth flattened into a thin line, his expression revealing his urge to cry. "I don't want Mother to die, I don't want a new owner. If I saw Mother die, then Dandan would rather never come out and forever be an egg." "What, Mother, don't abandon Dandan." Hushi sighed, and for a moment her heart was full of a bitter yet soft feeling. This little guy, how could it so easily make people distressed to the point that even she, with a heart of stone, couldn't help but be soft-hearted and moved. Hashi kissed his small cheek and softly said, "All right, I promise you, Dandan, that I won't die and abandon you. Dandan is a good child, so don't cry anymore, okay?" Dandan's mind was only matured to that of a 4 or 5-year-old child, so when he heard that he immediately felt happy. Clasping his cheeks that were kissed by Hashi, he continuously giggled, his little face filled with happiness and joy. However, when his gaze landed on the body of the still unconscious little golden dragon on the edge of the spirit spring, he immediately reverted back into a crying bun. "Mother, why hasn't Long Long woken up yet? Is Long Long going to die? Mother, you're so powerful, so save him, okay?" Carrying Dandan, Hashi made her way towards the edge of the spirit spring, and seeing the little golden dragon's body covered in cuts and bruises, her heart found it difficult to bear. She had only just formed a contract with this spirit pet, so she didn't yet have any sentimental feelings for it, and so far their interactions had been ones of looking down upon one another. However, she never would have thought that it would go to such an extent to save her. Chapter 277, Burning Heaven Realm? Divine Dragon Fruit. Just a quick look at little golden dragon's body and she could tell that he had a large burn spot, as well as a multitude of sword injuries. His originally golden yellow scales were now broken and bent out of place, while his horns were broken off at the base. With his body and flesh being so burnt in some parts, although the wounds had already stopped bleeding due to the effect of the spring water, it still looks miserable and hideous. Hashi stepped forward to examine the little golden dragon's condition and discovered that even though the water from the 9th secluded spirit spring had strong healing properties for people, it seemed that its effects on the little golden dragon weren't all that effective. Moreover, she was an expert in treating people, so she was completely unfamiliar in regards to the dragon's body structure. Also, even if she wanted to use her silver needles on his acupuncture points to see if it helped heal him, it would be impossible. The little golden dragon's breathing was currently very weak, while his initially arrogant and haughty eyes were now tightly closed. Hashi peeled one of his eyelids back to take a look and found that the pupil seemed slightly dilated. In any case, this wasn't a good sign. Her brows creased tightly and Dandan, who stood on the side, pulled at a corner of her clothes with an expression of hope and expectation as he looked at her. Hashi quickly took out a bunch of medicine bottles. Then, she boiled together a medicinal liquid made of the medicinal pills mixed with 9th secluded spirit spring water and soaked the entirety of the little golden dragon's body in it. Due to the medicine's powerful effect, the wounds that were still seeping out blood began to completely heal, while his dark scales started to return to their previous luster. But at best, such treatment could only cure the little golden dragon's surface injuries. For his internal injuries, Hashi was helpless. The plan, for now, was to at least leave this secret territory earlier and then find a treatment method. Perhaps that old glutton who claimed he was Daoist spiritual master Qing would have a few methods to help her. Hashi was immersed in her worries when suddenly, the little golden dragon's faint voice was heard, Go to the burning heaven realm, find the divine dragon fruit." Burning heaven realm? Divine dragon fruit? Hashi startled when she heard this. She didn't know where the burning heaven realm was, but she did know about the divine dragon fruit as she had read about it before in the All Living Things record. It was a kind of spirit clan demon elixir. A martial artist's spiritual base could quickly promote after taking it, especially during the promotion period, and it could even help raise the power of their level advancement. Chapter 278, Nangong You Was Afraid. Currently, Dandan was feeling an immense amount of energy spreading throughout his body, making his previously empty stomach become warm and feel exceptionally comfortable. This feeling, compared to drinking spirit spring water and eating spiritual plants and fruits from the space, was much better. Promptly obeying Hashi, he closed eyes and began to absorb the energy. At the same time, the little golden dragon's breathing started to regulate while he was still unconscious. Watching Dandan's dried-up body slowly become rounded again, Hashi couldn't help but let out a sigh of relief. So sitting cross-legged at the edge of the spring, she began to cultivate. Although she had just gotten the Mohar inheritance, she was extremely interested in it. She believed that as long as she completely mastered the cultivation technique of the Mohar inheritance, beating down Feng Lianying wouldn't even be an issue anymore. Time flowed, and in the blink of an eye, one night had already passed. In the cave, Nangongyu opened his eyes to examine his condition and was satisfied when he found that the injury to his meridians had nearly completed healing. His dried-up dantian had also been filled with spiritual power, while his strength was restored to at least 70%. 11's ninth secluded spirit spring water was indeed the best healing medicine for martial artists, especially for superficial wounds and spiritual power depletion. It was simply 100 times more powerful than ordinary medicinal pills. Nangongyu stood up and went to walk outside the cave, but just as he arrived at the entrance, his heart started palpitating. His figure suddenly rushed out, but there was only an empty area before his eyes. Apart from the occasional rustling of the purple abyss vine's leaves, Hashi was nowhere to be seen. 11. Nangongyu subconsciously shouted out loud, not even realizing that his voice was somewhat trembling due to fear. Why wasn't 11 here? Did she get angry and disappointed so she left, completely cutting off all ties with him? Or did she encounter danger? With these thoughts swirling around in his mind, Nangongyu felt like his throat was being tightly clutched, making it extremely difficult to breathe. But soon, he heard a strange whistling sound, and following that, Hashi gracefully floated down from above to firmly land in front of him. When Hashi had woken up in the morning and noticed that Nangongyu was still meditating, she had gone to the top of the cliff alone to examine it first. She had even left the purple abyss vine guarding the entrance so that when Nangongyu awoke he would know that she hadn't just left. However, when she suddenly heard Nangongyu shouting, she had hurriedly come back down. Hashi watched as Nangongyu stared at her, and just as she was about to speak, Nangongyu suddenly strode forward and pulled her into his arms. Nangongyu's strength was tremendous, and as he pressed her body against his, it nearly crushed her bones. It hurts. Hashi frowned and wanted to push him away, but she found that Nangongyu was actually trembling. His body holding her was cold, unlike the scorching temperature it normally was. So even though he tried to conceal it, Hashi could still feel that his body was continuously trembling while he hugged her. Nangongyu was afraid. What was he afraid of? Hashi was puzzled, but her body betrayed her reasoning, and reaching out her hand, she gently stroked his back as if she was comforting a child who'd been awakened by a nightmare. Her voice was gentle as she asked, "What happened?" Nangongyu tightened his hold on her and buried his face in her hair, refusing to speak for a long while. Just as Hashi was about to ask again, Nangongyu abruptly released her and with a gloomy voice asked, "Where did you go? Why is there such a potent smell of blood coming from your body?" His voice was full of anxiety and anger, but it was also mixed with distress and worry. Nangongyu abruptly grabbed Hashi's hand and began to search for where she was injured. Chapter 279. Tie you to my side. Hashi pushed him away, and with a blush covering her face she angrily said, "Where do you think you're touching? Pervert." "I'm fine. I wanted to take a look what's on the top of the cliff, and in passing I dealt with a few dark devil wolves." A dark devil wolf was a third-rank demonic beast. Although its cultivation base wasn't very high, they usually lived in packs, which meant that if you encountered one, it was the same as meeting a dozen of them. Even knowing that Hashi's current cultivation base was high enough to handle them, Nangongyu still had some lingering fears. "Why didn't you call me?" Hashi stared at him with puzzlement. Just a moment ago fear had been plastered across his face, but now it had clearly transformed into anger. Was he bipolar? "They're nothing but third-rank demonic beasts, I can easily deal with them." After saying that, she turned towards the cave to pack up, but after barely walking 2 steps, Nangongyu pulled her back. Hashi wanted to struggle free but found herself unable to now that Nangongyu's strength had been restored. There was no way she could fight him. Soon, Nangongyu's hand captured both of her wrists behind her back, while the other hand held her slender waist and firmly pressed her against his chest. "Next time, no matter what happens, don't ever leave me. Do you hear me?" Hashi angrily struggled and tried to break from his hold, but instead, she ended up being pressed tighter against him, resulting in almost no space left between the two of them. Nangong, you might as well find a rope to tie me up with at this rate. Hashi had only said that because she was furious, but when Nangong heard it, his eyes instantly lit up. Good idea. Following that, a length of finger-thick golden silk appeared in his hand, and before Hashi had time to realize what was going on, he moved to tie her hands behind her back. This was a high-level spiritual weapon called golden silk. Flying swords were unable to cut it, while water and heat weren't capable of damaging it. If she was tied by that, would she still be able to escape? Hashi struggled with all her might. Nangong, are you kidding me? Do you think I'm joking? Nangong leaned closer to her ear and whispered in a hoarse voice, "Who told you to be so disobedient, always thinking of running away from me? Instead of always worrying about your safety, it's better to tie you to my side." Hashi felt the icy cold spiritual power of the golden silk wrap around her wrists and became extremely anxious. Before, even though she had used all of her spiritual power, she still hadn't been able to break free from Nangong's hands. "Elevena, I can untie you, but only if you'll promise me that you stay by my side at all times." How could Hashi currently dare to argue with this crazy man? A wise man knows better than to fight when the odds are against him, so she hastily nodded and agreed. "All right, I'm afraid of you, so I'll promise you. Will that do? Now quickly release me." With that, Nangong was satisfied and swiftly released her hands. Immediately jumping back a step, alertness and caution were on her face as she glared at him. These kinds of unyielding yet delicate eyes resembled the luminous eyes of a little leopard. Seeing them, Nangong felt his mind drift away and suddenly reached out his hands to pull her towards him. Hashi abruptly felt herself moving backwards uncontrollably, and when she returned to her senses, she found herself once again in Nangong's embrace. Nangong lowered his head and passionately kissed her bright red lips. After a moment, once he released her lips, his voice was lower and softer, like a gentle flow of water. "Elevena, I've wanted to do that since a long time ago." Hashi ferociously wiped her lips that were extremely painful from being kissed and angrily glared at him. Unfortunately, she didn't want to provoke this crazy man again, so she turned around to enter the cave. After she finished tidying up her stuff, the two quickly flew to the peak of the cliff. Yesterday, it had been Hashi carrying Nangong, but this time, regardless of Hashi's protests, Nangong had embraced her waist and carried her to the peak in only a moment. Chapter 280, Rumors. At the peak of the cliff there was a stretch of green hills, and not too far in the distance, there were the dead bodies of more than 10 dark devil wolves lying on the ground, emitting the thick smell of blood. Before Hashi had time to take the bodies of the dark devil wolves into her space, Nangong wanted to help her and sliced downwards with his sword. Unfortunately, when his sword went to cut into the bodies of the dark devil wolves, it crushed them into dust and caused perfectly good food materials to be wasted. Hashi fiercely glared at Nangong and seeing him rubbing his nose while looking helpless and awkward, she turned around and couldn't help but utter a soft laugh. She hadn't expected such an embarrassed expression on the almighty Hell King. It was so surprising that it was very cute. Hashi had barely finished sorting out what was left of the dark devil wolves and was about to call out to Nangong that they could depart, when she suddenly sensed something and turned to gaze towards the distant sky. A moment later, a few figures flew over and abruptly landed in front of them. Before Hashi could get a clear look at who they were, she saw a black-clothed man step forward with large strides and drop to one knee in front of Nangong, greeting him with clasped hands. "Master, are you all right?" The person before them was Qing Long. Of course, it wasn't only Qing Long, there were also a few bodyguards from Hell King Manor, most of them high-level Meridian stage martial artists. But what surprised Hashi the most was that Jiyu Liufeng and Zhu Yangan were also there. As soon as Jiyu Liufeng spotted Hashi, he slowly walked up to her and asked, "Little Yua, are you okay?" Hashi didn't have time to reply before she felt something tighten around her hand, and by the time she realized what was happening, she had already been tugged behind Nangong. With a gloomy look on his face, he fixedly glared at Jiyu Liufeng, a dangerous light flashing within his eyes. Young Master Ji, what did you think would happen when she's by my side? Ji Liufeng stared blankly. Following which, he revealed a meaningful smile and lazily said, "There's no need for your Highness Hell King to be so petty. You two were opposing each other before, so I was unaware that you and little Yua were companions. An exchange of blows may lead to friendship, and since your Highness Hell King won't hurt little Yua, let's shake hands and get along." His explanation didn't make Nangong Yu's expression better, it instead caused it to become darker. "Shut up. Who allowed you to call her little Yua? Who would want to shake hands with you? Go far away from Elevener." Ji Liufeng looked at him with ridicule on his face and spread out his hands as he laughingly said, "You can say Elevener, yet I can't say little Yua? Little Yua, you say something, am I right?" Nangong Yu pulled out his flying sword with his complexion as black as storm clouds. "You're courting death." Ji Liufeng seemed to be shocked as he took 3 steps backwards, but the expression in his peach blossom-like eyes was still relaxed, as if he was having fun teasing. Okay, in the future I'll call him Shi Yu, that's okay, right? Yet after a brief pause, he rubbed his chin while his line of sight swept back and forth between Nangong Yu and Hushi. After what seemed to be a moment of contemplation, he meaningfully said, "This attitude of Hell King towards little Yua, Shi Yu, you can really make one's imagination run wild. It's just that, why was there a rumor on the streets about you and that Ice Lotus Fairy? Your Highness Hell King, to be so hot and cold like this and have an affair, it's not good at all." Nangong Yu was stunned. "What rumor?" "Naturally it's a rumor surrounding your marriage." Ji Liufeng's charming peach blossom-like eyes widened. He was obviously still wearing a mask, but it gave people the perception of grace. "It's well known that Hell King Manor will be connected by marriage to one of Mi Luo continent's 4 large sects, Liu Li sect, and that Hell King and Liu Li sect's young clan head, Ice Lotus Fairy, had long found affinity with the other, and that you'd been yearning for each other secretly all this time. As soon as Ice Lotus Fairy leaves her closed-door cultivation, breaking through to nascent soul stage, the two of you will finally forge an alliance. Your Highness Hell King, this news is known by everyone in Yangjing City, don't tell me that you don't know about this." Chapter 281, The Space Cracks. Nangong Yu's eyes instinctively looked towards Hushi, while Hushi snorted coldly and turned her head away to avoid looking at him. His face became extremely cold. Without bothering to answer Ji Liufeng, he instead chose to look at Qing Long with eyes containing a bitingly cold murderous intent. Qing Long hurriedly took a step forward and cautiously said, "Answering Master, these rumors were spread by Intoxicated Happiness Square a while ago. We had originally wanted to deal with these rumors, but Q did some investigating and found that Intoxicated Happiness Square was Liu Li sect's property. She also said, Master, that the friendship between you and Ice Lotus Fairy isn't ordinary, so if we handled it rashly, it would affect your relationship with Liu Li sect. Therefore, it has been delayed up until now." It would have been better if Qing Long hadn't spoken those words, but once he did, Ji Liufeng couldn't help but leisurely laugh as he strolled to Hushi's side and said, "Little Yua, did you hear that? So they've actually had an unusual friendship since a long time ago." Hushi coldly glared at Ji Liufeng, causing him to rub his nose and reluctantly say, "All right, Shi Yu." Nangong Yu's gloomy and cold gaze glared at Qing Long, making Qing Long, who was being stared at so bluntly, feel cold all over. He had the feeling that he would be kicked by his master at any moment. Shrinking his neck into his shoulders, he looked up and whispered, "Master." Nangong Yu coldly said, "Once we return, I want to see Intoxicated Happiness Square destroyed. If you can't even properly handle this kind of matter, all 4 of you better get out of Hell King Manor." "Yes, Master." Qing Long breathed out a long sigh of relief and wiped the cold sweat from his forehead before he then took a step backwards. Hushi was now bored of hearing about Ice Lotus Fairy, so she turned and looked at Ji Liufeng. "How did you find this place?" It must be known that Nangong Yu and Hushi hadn't disappeared normally, rather, they were drawn into the space crack. If the others had wanted to follow their trail to come here, it was simply impossible. Ji Liufeng said, This one would like to thank that black-clothed bodyguard belonging to His Highness Hell King. After both of you disappeared, Feng Lianying, that malicious woman, and Senior Nai, joined together to try and kill me. Fortunately, that brother came to the rescue. Hashi glanced at him before lightly snorting. Would you have really been wiped out by Feng Lianying and Nai Jinchen? They had no hope of getting rid of you, you who pretends to be a pig being eaten by a tiger. She had in no way been inattentive when Jiyu Liufeng had been fighting with Feng Lianying. If it hadn't been due to Nangong Yu being on nascent soul stage, even if Nai Jingchen had joined in, Jiyu Liufeng still would have won with ease. Cough cough. Jiyu Liufeng seemed to choke on his own saliva and stroking his chin in disbelief. He said, "Little Yua, you actually have so much confidence in me, this is really my honor." Nangong Yu was watching on the side, and seeing Jiyu Liufeng and Hashi talking so happily together, he felt like there was a fire nestled in his heart. He was itching to slaughter that frivolous kid who wore a mask. However, because of the rumors surrounding his supposed marriage from earlier, he didn't want to provoke Elevenor into getting angrier. Due to this, Nangong Yu was feeling somewhat uneasy and he didn't dare act rashly. Speaking of this, he really was wronged. He obviously hadn't known anything about this rumor, and what's more, from childhood up till now he'd been never close to any woman. Now that he finally had someone he loved, he kept being misunderstood and ignored. It simply made an unspeakably frustrated and irritated mood boil within him. When Qing Long saw that his master was covered in a murderous aura that he was unable to vent, how could he not understand? So quickly stepping forward, he said, "Prin, cough. Young Master Shi, this humble one and master have established a blood contract, so even if we're miles away from each other I can still sense master's location. Therefore, I was able to bring young Master Jiyu with me to find this place. This space crack has a high possibility of tearing apart, so all the way here this subordinate was worried, but fortunately, you and master are all right." Chapter 282. Gluttonous Wu Yu. When Hashi recalled the warm power that had wrapped around her when she was in the space crack, her expression couldn't help but become slightly gentle. However, Jiyu Liufeng standing nearby continued to add oil to the fire by saying, "Little Yua, in the future you must be careful of Feng Lianying, that poisonous woman. TSK, you didn't get to see the sinister expression on her face after you and Hell King had disappeared. Even I myself had goosebumps when I saw it. I think she regards you as a powerful enemy who wants to snatch away her boyfriend. A woman who's jealous to the core will do whatever's necessary, no matter how unreasonable it is." Hashi was too lazy to correct Jiyu Liufeng of that nauseating address, and hearing what he had said, she sneered, "Even if she doesn't come to find me, it's unlikely that I'll ever let her off. At the end of the day, we'll see who moves faster and whose methods are more ruthless between the two of us." Jiyu Liufeng clapped his hands and laughed loudly. "Little Yua, I like your take on revenge of hatred and forthright character. If I currently had wine, I would definitely have a drink with you, as I agree with you, my friend. Right, when you deal with that venomous woman, remember to call for me, as I have a great deal of hatred for her due to her injuring Yangan. So long as His Highness Hell King doesn't interfere, I believe that I still have the qualifications to help you out." After saying that, Jiyu Liufeng glanced towards Nangong Yu and saw a dark and gloomy face glaring back at him. Nangong Yu's expression was like he had just drunk vinegar and was on the verge of erupting. He obviously didn't care about the life or death of Ice Lotus Fairy, so Jiyu Liufeng couldn't help but smile. It seemed that the rumor really was unfounded. He hadn't expected that His Highness Hell King, who'd always been cold-hearted and never close to a female, to actually be fond of a man. Nevertheless, the beautiful youth was to some degree more beautiful than a celestial being in a painting. Just as Hashi was about to reply, she sensed movement, and in the next second, she saw a silhouette rapidly fly over them and land right before Nangong Yu. It was one of Nangong Yu's trusted aides, Wu Yu. Wu Yu first saluted Nangong Yu, then reported the result of his explorations of the secret territory. After finishing, he turned his head and saw Hashi, causing him to immediately exclaim, "Prin, cough. Young Master Shi, why are you here?" Hashi nonchalantly responded with, "Why can't I be here?" "No, young Master Shi, Of course you can be here. Wu Yu swiftly changed his stunned expression into a smile of fawning. I was just so deeply emotional because Bai Hu, that boy, couldn't find you outside. He even scoured all of Yangjing City, yet he still couldn't find you. Hushi raised her brows in puzzlement. Why is Bai Hu looking for me? Naturally, it's to protect you. Wu Yu gave her a look of why are you asking a question when you already know the answer? Master was aware that he would enter the secret territory, but this secret territory is extremely dangerous for martial artists of Meridian Stage and below, so naturally he couldn't bring you with him. Yet he was also worried that someone would trouble you when he wasn't present, and therefore he sent Bai Hu to protect you outside. You don't know this, but I had originally wanted to handle the task of protecting you, while Bai Hu had wanted to follow Master into the secret territory to take a look. But that grumpy brother of mine, Wu Xin, simply didn't listen to my protests and he kicked me straight into the secret territory. You tell me, with ashes, mountains, and rocks everywhere, where there's nothing delicious to eat, what's the meaning of me even coming here? But I really didn't expect to see you, young Master Shi. Your cultivation base is so low yet you were actually able to enter the secret territory. This is great, I no longer have to worry about what there is to eat. It's because Master missed you and hated to part with you, so at the last moment he dragged you along. Chapter 283, Shameless and Without Integrity. Cough cough. Wu Yu, you better shut up. A cold and deep voice abruptly sounded, interrupting Wu Yu's chatter. Wu Yu had always been slow to react, and turning his head, he noticed that Nangong Yu's face had darkened to the point where it could almost freeze water. Shuddering all over, he subconsciously moved closer towards Hushi and muttered, "Hehe, just take it as if I'd never said anything. I don't know anything, I don't know." After that, he quickly turned to look at Hushi with a twinkle in his eyes, and if there had been a tail behind him, it probably would have been wagging. You know, young Master Shi, ever since I ate the spiritual food you made, I couldn't eat any other food for many days. Now that I've finally seen you again, it's really such a fortuitous event. So, do you have anything to eat? Jiyu Liufeng's eyes were full of shock as he stared at Wu Yu in confusion. He seemed to have found out an incredible fact. This man before him, wasn't he the owner of Gluttonous House? He hadn't expected that one of Yangjing City's most famous buildings, Gluttonous House, would actually belong to Hell King Manor. In the end, how many secret forces did Hell King have? No, that's not the point. The point is that Wu Yu, who to everyone's eyes was the mysterious, powerful, and cold-blooded owner of Gluttonous House, was privately so shameless and without integrity. An expert gold core stage martial artist was actually begging for food from little Yua, and what's more, he didn't look the slightest bit ashamed. Jiyu Liufeng felt like his 3 points of view had sustained a great impact. Qing Long's face twisted as he held his forehead. Could he say that he didn't know this idiot? With Wu Yu's conduct, he didn't believe that he could proudly stand side by side with him as one of Hell King's personal bodyguards. He refused to acknowledge Wu Yu as it was simply making him too ashamed. What Wu Xin had said was right. This gluttonous kid would one day be killed by his own mouth. Hushi looked at Wu Yu's sparkling eyes and watched as the corners of his mouth impossibly stretched wider and brighter. When she heard the sound of him swallowing his saliva, her mouth couldn't help but twitch. I believe I said last time that it wouldn't be repeated. I'm not a personal chef for Hell King Manor, so don't expect food from me every day. She liked to cook and had only intended for her food to be used as a way to reward herself, not for it to be wasted on other people. Dandan was her closest spiritual pet, so it wasn't a problem. And as for Nangong Yu, anyway, she didn't like the feeling that she had to serve other people. Hushi lifted her foot to leave, but Wu Yu rushed over and grabbed her skirt, giving her a "if you don't give me a meal, I won't let you go" look. Young Master Shi, as long as you give me some delicious food, I'll do anything you order me to do. I'll work extremely hard and won't hesitate at all. Whenever you, young Master Shi, send me on an errand, as long as it isn't harmful to Hell King Manor, I, Wu Yu, will brave any difficulty to achieve it. Blue veins twitched on Hush's forehead. She wanted to get away from him and leave, but Wu Yu's unreasonable behavior and bawling had reached a completely shameless point. Oh well, although she was too lazy to cook, she still had some food that she had prepared earlier in her space. Forget about it, she would just give in and give some to him. She couldn't afford to throw away this shameless scoundrel without integrity just yet. Hushi withdrew a roast chicken from her space and threw it at him, and without waiting for her to say something, Wu Yu grabbed the roast chicken and started to devour it. The crispy golden roast chicken was fragrant with tender meat. Emitting strong spiritual power, it was accompanied by the smell of seasoning that wafted around everyone present, making them all unconsciously swallow their saliva. Jiyu Liufeng had originally scoffed at Wu Yu's shamelessness, but now, he couldn't help but breathe in deeply and feel his stomach begin to rumble due to emptiness. You're tuning in to the Dreamy Chapters YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.